Thank you.
Thank you, man. All right, here we go. Another True Brew Bobcast here at Cafe Dayton at the end of Dayton Road. Welcome, Mr. Harry Creek.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you.
All right. You had a good drive in?
It was very nice. It's surprising how comfortable it is at the end of this road.
Right.
It's surprising what you have here at the end of this road. I would have never thought that this would be like this. Coming down that road where it ends and turns into a gravel road and takes you out through the cane fields,
Hey,
and then it opens up.
It's God's country, bro.
Yeah, it truly is.
Hey, so look, let's get right into it. So you're almost 40% Cherokee Indian.
About 36%. Yes.
Okay, so let's reflect a minute this morning.
Sure.
Go way back in your mind here, and you were bring us back to young Harry, and what was that like? Where was that taking place?
Okay. In order to get the perspective on this, let me just go back a little bit. Okay. I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in 1949. So for those of you that are figuring up, I'm 74 years old. All right. My father's father was full-blooded Cherokee Indian. And regretfully, that part of my family I did not get to communicate with very much. My father and his father were not on really good speaking terms with each other, which back during that time was not totally unusual. And my father never talked about the rift between him and his father. I think I made it to my grandfather's house on my father's side maybe twice in my lifetime. A beautiful home. You could tell by looking at my father's father that he was full-blooded Cherokee Indian. So my mother's side of the family is more Irish. So that's where the watering down begins. Like I said, I was born in Oklahoma, grew up a little bit there. My parents moved to California. Most of my childhood, I remember growing up in California, joining the military at a very young age, and back in 1967. Probably one of the smartest moves I ever made because I stayed in it for 22 years. Got out, retired after 22 years, came to Louisiana, met my wife, born full-blooded Cajun. So our son, Miles, is now Cherokee, Irish, Cajun, into whatever mixture that turns out to be. And I don't even have any idea what percentage of Native. His children, as far as the Native American culture is concerned, he has an Indian card, which enables him that if he were to, say, move to Oklahoma, he would get his free medical, he could continue his education, he could put in for a house to live on reservation land or Indian land. There's a lot of benefits for moving back up there. He's never going to because he's lived his whole life down here. And this is where he likes to live, so he's going to stay. But his children will be the last children in my bloodline that can apply for a Native American card. After that, the bloodline will be so thin that they won't recognize it anymore.
So was your dad involved with you when you were growing up?
My dad was not a stay-at-home dad most of the time. My childhood is very, very cloudy as far as parents are concerned. I would say I had a normal childhood that I would consider normal. I mean, my parents were very good. They did the very best they could. We had 3 children in my family. I was the youngest. I have an older brother and sister. But my dad initially was a watch repairer. He had his own shop where he would repair watches, sell watches. Then he got out of that and got into driving a truck. And he did that for as long as I could remember till I went into the military. And in fact, I went into the military because my father was in the military. He was actually in the old Army Air Force, as they called it, before the Air Force was established. So he was in the Army Air Force and got a medical discharge. And he was very proud of his military heritage. And I think that rubbed off on my brother and I, because my brother went into the military, served in Vietnam, again, served another 22 years. I went into the military, was on the way to Vietnam, got deferred to South Korea because my brother was in Vietnam at the same time. And you could not have the only two surviving sons in Vietnam at the same time. So I was deferred. Turned out to be great for me. I loved Korea. And we just, the military has been part of our life. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. I'm just trying to still track a little bit further back, retroing back a little bit. So, was your father was he raised on the reservation?
No. My father left home at a very young age, all right, and went out on his own. He was married twice, and I didn't find that out until much later. I know very little about his first wife and their children. However, after my father's passing, one of his daughters did get in touch with us, and now I have a niece who has gotten in touch with me and with my brother and sister, and she's bringing more of our family history from that portion where my father was married the first time into our life to let us know about her and about her mother, which was my father's first wife, about her brothers and sisters, and about her children. So it's opening up a little bit to where we're seeing more of what I refer to as the Creek family history.
So is that the name, the Creek? Like, how far back does your last name Creek go with the Cherokee?
It goes pretty far back.
Now weren't there the Creek Indians?
There were Creek Indians, yes.
So is that a correlation there?
I don't think so. I at first I thought there might have been, but any research that I've been able to do, I don't see a correlation to where the two marry up. I'm not sure where the last name Creek originated from, because I can only trace it back to my great-grandfather, and before that, I'm not sure what it was, because most of them were Native American names.
So was any stories passed down to you? I mean, where was clearly the Trail of Tears was 1830?
1831, 32.
32. Okay, so do you know where your ancestors came from? Were they from the East Coast that was brought there, or what was told to you?
The only thing that I know about my ancestral history that was passed down through us, or through my family to me, is that, and I had a cousin that did a lot of research on it, is that most of our Native American history that we know of on our side of the family, or I should say my father's side of the family, is picked up in Oklahoma. So that would be towards the end of the Trail of Tears, okay, to where they were relocating them onto reservations. Regretfully, my father didn't talk about it that much, so that it's almost like lost history, unless we have someone in our family, which we had, my cousin Ann, and she passed away about 6 months ago, did enormous amounts of research for our family. And we started finding out things that we never even knew about. In fact, one of the interesting things is one of the state quarters, Oklahoma State quarters, on the back of it, there's a mill. It's called Kellogg's Mill or something like that. Well, my family actually owned that and built that mill, and we didn't know about it until our cousin Ann researched it and showed it to us, and then she received these quarters when they were made, and she sent them out to all the family members, along with a little bio of when the family actually built and occupied that mill, which is now a state registered national, recognized area. But getting back to the Native American side, I I wish I could sit here and tell you more. I wish I knew more, but I don't. It's like anything else that I believe in someone's life. When you don't talk about it, when it's not brought up, and it's not discussed, it's tucked away in a drawer, it's forgotten. And regretfully, that part of my life has been forgotten for a long time. Do I associate with Native Americans? Yes. Do I support them in any way that I can? Absolutely. Am I a card carrying Native American? Got it in my wallet right now. Okay. Does my son know anything about it? No.
So when you were going through your formative years, was it a stigma thing, or were you a proud Cherokee descendant, or how did you approach it as a young man learning to be a man?
I wouldn't say that it was a stigma. Good morning.
All right, good morning. All right.
I wouldn't say it was a stigma, okay? But it wasn't discussed either. All through my younger days, I don't think anybody knew that any portion of my family was Native American. All through my high school, no. I think the only time I started referring myself as a Native American is once I had broken away from family life and entered the military. And years after I entered the military, they were coming out with these forms. What is your ethnic background? Are you this or this? And then I noticed, okay, well, they have Native American on there. Okay, I'm going to check that, because the one thing I can say about my father is that when my brother and I were young in high school, he did get us registered with Tahlequah, which is the Cherokee Native American headquarters in Oklahoma. He registered us. He made sure that our names were on that tribal list, which years later now turned out to be very beneficial, because I had lost my card, my original card, so I contacted Tahlequah. It took me a year and a half to get my card back.
And what's Tahlequah again?
Tahlequah is the headquarters in Oklahoma, Tahlequah, Oklahoma, for Cherokee Nation.
For Cherokee Nation.
Yes, Cherokee
And
Nation.
say that they try to keep a good documentation.
Oh, they have a role there. That's where you have to go in order to get your identification card, which it's actually called a bloodline card. It tells you how much Cherokee you are, and a blue card, which is your registration card. You have to have those two things in order to get anything, any benefits that the Cherokee might offer you, such as a couple years ago, the Cherokee came into I don't know how much money, but it was split up between all the tribal members. So if you were a card-carrying, registered Cherokee Indian, they don't care where you lived, all right? If you could give them your registration number and send them a copy of your card, then they sent you a check.
But all right, okay. You told everybody your age. Here you are in your early 70s. And so just sort of reflecting back, you know what I mean? So you're reflecting back on how you're here right now. And of course you had your life, and it was after a huge piece of history took place. And so we were talking about that the other day, how 250 years isn't that long ago. You know what I mean? If you're talking about 7 generations, maybe 9 at the most.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about 4 lifetimes, with you being one. You see what I mean? That wasn't that long ago that the Native Americans had their own basically bloodline on the North and South America. They crossed over the ice bridge, and this is a whole group of human beings that are totally quite different than the Europeans, and not only evolving with their characteristics and features of a Native American, all the way through, the Hispanics, all the way down to the Mayans. Um, but here comes Columbus and the Europeans and just really jacks everything up. I mean, from what I understand, the American Indians had their own, spirituality. It was very, very connected with the earth. They understood the balance of it. They were real, real clear on that. And from what I understand, when the Europeans started coming, they were sort of excited about this discovery and the opportunity of bigger things, only to be brought to small reservations. So you ever reflect on the trauma that was handed down that you bear? I mean, does any of that weigh any on you?
I can honestly say it doesn't weigh on me. It disturbs me because you're talking about something that is not totally forgotten. If you go up to Oklahoma right now, and you can go out on, for lack of a better word, you can go out on reservation land that is owned by the Native Americans, all right? And they build track houses just like we have here in Louisiana. It's like you have anywhere in the United States, all right? They build track homes. They build little communities, all right? But it's not the same. If you go to a community here in Louisiana and you see the track homes, like right down the street, right here, coming in to your beautiful home here, you've got these beautiful subdivisions, all right, that are well maintained and taken care of and supported by the state, okay, and supported by the people that live there. You go up and you go to a subdivision that is located on a reservation today. Where my parents used to live, homes that were built by Native Americans, land that is owned by Native Americans. Your neighbors are Native American. But it's not the same. It doesn't look the same. It doesn't feel the same. It might not be kept up as neat. There's a stigma that goes with Native Americans that I'm sure everybody has heard, that Native Americans can't hold their liquor. All right, that if you get them drunk, they go wild. All right. Well, I'm here to tell you honestly, that's not just Native Americans. That's everybody. But it does. It happens.
Well, I listened to a podcast the other day. I forgot the doctor's name, and they brought up that exact point. They're like, well, this stigma of Native Americans in predisposed to being alcoholics. His argument is, or it could be generational systemic trauma. I mean, you took people who've never seen a white person before, coming in with armor and horses and taking over their land. There's a lot of confusion there, and just 3 generations into it, now you're on a literal trail of tears, reduced to, slaughtered all your buffalo and all that stuff. So, so that's just all handed down, generation to generation of them dealing with trauma. The doctor was saying this is how they're dealing and self-medicating trauma. And their child is going to learn that, and their child's going to learn that, and the trauma just keeps going. What did you say to that?
I would say he's probably 100% correct, because it's not only Native Americans. You can see that in any society, and you can take an ethnic background and you can say, okay, let's look at what their children are doing, but let's look at what the mothers, what the fathers, and what the grandparents did, and it's identical to what the children are doing right now. because you learn from what you see. All right. My son today is a teacher. All right. He learned that from his mother. Okay. He learned that from his grandmother, who was a teacher. And I'm not sure if his great grandmother was a teacher or not. Okay. But getting back to the Native Americans, and about the worst thing that I can think of that's happened to Native Americans is not only the introduction of the European onto their soil, okay, which was like a flood coming from east to west, all right, taking over everything, that almost like a virus, all right, but every time that the Native American would back down and agree to something with the United States government, all right, and they would settle on a treaty with the government that the government said was fair, and the Native American believed him,
And they back out.
it was broken. Every single treaty that was given to Native Americans was broken. And what upsets me more than anything else at my age and where I'm at in my life right now is that when I hear people talk about reparations that need to be made to other ethnic backgrounds, okay, that didn't even start here in the United States, all right, but regretfully, that's part of our history that people are trying not to talk about and try to erase, except when it comes to reparations. And then people are wanting money for something that happened to their great, 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 great grandparents, all right? I'm thinking, well, what about the reparations to the people that actually lived here long before anybody else came? What about the reparations for the Native Americans, regardless of their tribe, that were here when the Europeans came and settled and started moving across like a flood, making all these promises to them, and now 250 years later, you look back, and where are the Native American people? I mean, if the people today were not standing up for what they believed was right, as far as true Native Americans, all right, they would go the same way as the dodo bird. They would become extinct, and people wouldn't even talk about them anymore. It's a part of history that they want to forget. And I hope it's a part of history that never gets forgotten.
Oh yeah, I agree. And look, history's riddled with, especially when it comes to conquering and taking over land and power. I mean, you can go from Genghis Khan to it's riddled with it.
Sure it is.
And so, every one of them is a tragedy, and every one of them, something great was lost. I guess what's most fascinating to me in this country, and especially in Acadiana, is it's how quick enculturation takes place. Like I was talking to Panat, the Laotian. His family came here in 1979. Hell, you probably got a jacket from 1979.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? You probably have some clothing or something.
Sure.
And so, they came here in '79. They built a community. They were exiled from Laos, went to a camp and moved right here, 5 miles from here. And talking to him about it, I'm like, okay, his parents didn't speak English, struggled to speak English. They had to wait for their children to go to school to speak good English, to come and negotiate and interpret and those things. And then now here they are, the next generation. None of them speak Laos, and they've all been enculturated into the system. And that coupled with creolization, creolization is a word of the blood, that's the people that are born in the United States and not Europe or wherever else. And so you can't have that conversation without mentioning the Native Americans. And so, it's clearly documented through the creolization of this area right here. A lot of Chittimachas and a lot of other Native Americans came in, and it was part of the fabric of being Creole. I mean, look what you continue the Creole line right now. You married a Cajun girl and mixed it all up. But, I don't know if it's good or bad. We want to preserve, in my opinion, we sure want to preserve and get history right. I think in my lifetime, the what really gets people emotional is when Miss Phoebe Hayes mentioned this the other day, when someone tries to sanitize history. You know, it's so we need to have these conversations to where it's okay to talk about it. Nobody's blaming people here. Like she said, I blame the people that are dead. I blame the people that let it happen back then. But the truth is, we weren't living back then. We didn't know what
No,
the
no
heck
one's
was going.
alive. What is alive today that was alive back then? And taking down statues and taking down signs and rewriting school books doesn't change history. What changes history is when you refuse to talk about it because now it's going to repeat itself. If there's one thing that I've learned in my 74 years of life is that history has a very strong way of coming back and repeating itself. And there are two words that I find very difficult to work with each other. One is to preserve, and the other is progress. Those two bump heads all the time because when people look at progress, this is progress, this is change. We have to keep moving on and doing this in order to attain the spot we want to be. Well, in order to do that, you can't preserve this. Well, if we can't preserve it, if we can't drag it along with us, leave it behind and bury it. We don't even need to talk about it anymore. So when it comes to preservation, which I'm like you, I believe people need to preserve things so we can not only learn from them, but we can pass it down generation to generation. Progress has a very strong way of rolling over it like a bulldozer. When you want to get from point A to point B and you have all these bumps in between, it's much easier just to steamroll over them and flatten them out than it is to build bridges over them.
Yeah. So if you were to ponder right now with me and think back to one of your great grandfathers or mothers, how do you envision them living their life somewhere between Oklahoma and the East Coast? I think that's where the Cherokee hung out the most. If you were to think back, what would be a typical day in the life of the Cherokee Indians?
For me, my belief, I've been up to Wyoming, South Dakota, North Dakota. I've been to the Little Bighorn, okay? And I found it fascinating to be able to stand up on the ridge and look down into the valley where the Native Americans were camped out, and to just imagine seeing 300 teepees down there, 500 horses, people walking back and forth from the stream, women doing laundry on rocks, men, carving up buffalo meat, riding horseback, making their own clothes. And I would like to seriously believe that my great great grandfather, that was his life, to get up every morning and understand that everything that he took or that was given from him that maintained his existence came from the earth. And when he was done with it, it went back to the earth. When somebody died, when something was killed, the carcass was buried or it was left out and other animals ate it, and then they were eaten by other animals or they were killed and used for food or clothing. But everything had a cycle of life back then. And the only time it was interrupted, and again, this is just my belief, the only time that it was interrupted was when the Europeans were introduced into the scene. And they brought over a different culture completely. And they started migrating from the East Coast to the West Coast. And they started infringing upon all the areas that belonged to the Native Americans. And they introduced diseases. They introduced poverty. They introduced liquor. They introduced a lot of things that so drastically changed the Native American way of life that they were unable to sustain their old way of life or even bring it back.
I guess what I envy the most over my when I think back of at the Native Americans and how pure it was is how much time and energy we waste or we spend just getting a job and working and worrying to death about a mortgage or this and that. I mean, these guys, I would like to think it was hard. They had hard winters. They had to
Sure.
move around. They had to follow the buffalo, I say. They had to nomad it up a little bit. The agriculture came a little bit later in it all, but
There was fighting between tribes, so
Uh,
it wasn't all peaceful.
that's right. That's all those things. Um, it reminds me. I had this guy explain too. They said, "What would be if you took someone like one of your great ancestors and jet them over here to meet you and check in on you?" And the question was asked to this guy. He said, "What would be the most astonishing to your great grandfather?" And I'll tell you his reaction, and you comment on it. And he says, "You can't say jets and going to the moon and highways and planes and trains and all that stuff. What would be one of the biggest things?" I tell you what, I'll have you guess first. What would you think it would be?
What would be the biggest shock to my great great grandfather?
Five greats.
That's difficult to answer because I think one of the biggest sorrows he might probably have is seeing that the lack of representation that I really have with the Native Americans right now, the loss of culture that he so depended upon to survive is no longer there. It's totally forgotten.
What would he be most proud of, you think?
I don't think that there would be anything that my great great grandfather standing here looking around could say he was proud of anything.
Well, you have to be impressed at mankind's progress, or maybe not. Maybe progress. He would say, "Man, you're destroying the earth."
And that's I was just going to say that to you. We can stand here and say, well, he'd have to be impressed with how far the human nature has brought us, and I'm thinking, why? Why? When he sits back and looks, what's impressive about sending fumes up into the air that we can't breathe? What's impressive about, you know, chasing animals away from their natural habitat? And what's impressive about not allowing people to live freely where they want to live on open land that never belonged to anybody to begin with, okay, that God put on this earth for everybody to be able to use. And now you're bringing me 250 years into the future, and I'm remembering what I had, and I'm looking at what you've got, and you're asking me, am I impressed? No, I'm not impressed at all.
Yeah, no, I would have to agree with you. The guy that I'm remembering this interview, this is what he said. He said what they would be most confused at, in their opinion, okay, is that we take our children and we put them in a class of people their exact age within a year of each other when they're 5 years old. And their education is with this same age group, until they're an adult. Whereas if you was living in the prairies with your great grandpa, you got educated by uncles and aunts and your grandpa, and this one told you how to skin something, this told you how to hunt, this is how you haul water, this is how you build a teepee. And so the layers of education, life education, life skills came from all different tribal deals, and I thought that was an interesting observation on that. And I'm like, I don't have any real big answers for it, other than it makes me envy that. I would venture to say that was probably a much better spent life from learning
Do
education.
you remember that old saying, it takes a village to raise a child?
Right.
That's what I envisioned back at that time. The entire village, all right, the entire community, all right, looked after each and every child. They didn't just look after their own. It was, if this child needed help, anybody from that community, anybody from that tribe, anybody from that little setting of humanity helped that child, all right? Brought them along, taught them different things, all the way up until they were become adult and moved into becoming a warrior for the tribe, a protector, a chief, a leader, whatever it might be. But I'm a firm believer also that it does take a village to raise a child. It takes more than just one person, all right? Uh, we have friends today, and I can't just say my son learned everything that he needs to know from his mother and I, because he didn't. He learned things through school. He learned things on his own. He learned things through our church. Learned things through a lot of organizations that he belongs to now as a young man. All right. So I truly wish I could take credit to where my son is today, but I can't. Most of that credit, 90% of that credit, I'd say, belongs to his mother and his grandmother. They were very influential in his life. Less so than me, but at that time that he was growing up, as you know, I worked for PHI. I was 14 on and 14 off. So he grew up with a 2-week father, that was there 2 weeks out of the month. And out of those 2 weeks, how many days did I actually interact with him? And then he's gone again. But his mom and his grandmother, and then they were there 24/7. So if he got hurt, it was his mom. If he needed something, it's his mom. Do you think it's that way today? Absolutely. He has no hesitation picking up the phone and calling his mom. Hey, you want to do this? You want to go have lunch? You want to go there? Do I expect those calls? No. Would I love to get him? Sure.
Right.
I'm always included. Don't get me wrong. He's not shutting me out, but that's not, what weighs heavily on his mind, because during his life as a child, growing into the young adult he is now, it was his mom, because I was gone like any other guy, out working, trying to provide for the family. Not that she didn't. I mean, she went to school. She got her degree. She got her master's degree. She's a speech therapist. She provides all kinds of things. But when he needed an adult as supervision and guidance, it was her in his younger years.
So I tell you what, let's sort of just ponder a little bit. If let's just think a little bit broader stroke from pre-Europeans, and let's take it, say, from that Trail of Tears, 1830, 4 generations through it. Here you are. Does what are your thoughts on it? I mean, what do you think about just the way the story's progressing? With like, are you good with, say, your son not knowing or understanding your lineage to the Cherokee tribe and the Native Americans? Is that up to him to be curious to go look into it if he wants? Or are you just saying, hey, this is your life to live, as my great 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 grandfather? What is your thoughts on that?
Well, first off, the historical lineage on my side of the family, the Native American side of the family, the lack of interest on my son's part is not his fault, because it was never brought up to begin with. As a young man growing up through our family and going through grade school and high school and college, we never discussed it. It's funny you should mention that, because the last time you and I talked, we went home, we started talking about it, and I was talking with my son, and I said, I would think you would agree when I would say that you know less about my side of the family, Native American wise, than you know about my side of the family military. And he goes, oh, I agree with that 100%. He goes, I know all about your military history, and I can walk in the room and see your uniforms and medals on the wall and everything. But there's no room to walk in that tells me anything about your Native American heritage. He said, so yeah, I don't know anything about that. Would I love to change that? Honestly, I think I would like to have changed that if I myself knew more, but I don't. Only because I didn't have that interaction with my father or my great grandfather or my grandfather that maybe could have made a difference. But since I didn't interact with them and I lost that part of my lineage, all right? I lost that Native American aspect of my life until years later. Uh, it becomes difficult for me to say, uh, you know, that I'm sorry it did. Yeah, I'm sorry it didn't happen. Uh, do I miss it? You can't miss something that you didn't know anything about. You know.
I guess that's
the
part of
sad
the
part.
tragedy too.
Yeah, that's part of the sad
So
part.
do you identify more with being a soldier?
Today and for probably the last 15 to 20 years, I identify more as a Native American than anything else. That's on all of my records. All right. But as far as personal identity, I think I will always identify more as a soldier than I would as a Native American
Why is that?
because I have the memories and I have the background to where I can sit and I can close my eyes and I can remember what I did from a young age as a soldier to the foreign countries that I went to all the experiences that I had, to the friends that I made, to the friends that I lost, and the lifestyle that I had for 22 years. That's all in my memories. The lifestyle that I had as a young Native American is nowhere in there. You
Well,
you can't relate to something to an experience you never had.
or that wasn't you wasn't educated on it.
Exactly. Yeah.
You wasn't.
I wasn't exposed to it.
Well, but you carry something. I would like to think. I mean, you have an interesting story. I mean, you're like almost 40% Cherokee.
I would like to think I carry the pride of being Native American
That's fair.
because that's something that a lot of people can't say. A lot of people say that, oh, yeah, I'm Native American. Well, if you're Native American, then you're a card carrying Native American. Don't come up and I wish everybody could say they were Native American truthfully, but don't come up and tell me that you're 5% Native American and that makes you Native American. If you're not going to support it, if you're not going to put it down completely and be tested and everything else, then there was, now I forget her name, there was a Congress lady years ago that used to claim she was Native American, Native American.
Right.
She wasn't, not one drop, okay?
Right.
And I agree with people. I hope that they support the Native Americans because we need all the support we can get.
Well, I think I like the story. I like to view the story as being yet another success story of living in a free country and the creolization of human beings and us adapting to what's in front of us. I mean, again, your story, a lot of Cherokee, some European, married a Cajun girl, so that's a lot of Cajun French involved in there, and I'm sure some other parts and pieces, and now your son's the product of all that stuff coming in. But it's a testament of us, in the end, learning to celebrate and get along as human beings first. So, um, but pretty interesting story.
It 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 always amazes me what human nature can adapt to because we've come a long way. We've gone through some trials and tribulations, but we've learned to live with each other. And I would like to think that the 22 years that I spent in the military, and that's the exact reason I spent it in there, to give everybody the right to make their own choice and live their life the way that they want to, all right? And without having to ask somebody else how to do it. The bad part about it is when other stronger, more powerful governments step in and try to tell you how to live your life. That's not right.
Okay, so look, how do these guys kind of follow you around? You got a little TikTok following? Anything you want to mention there?
I have a TikTok page, which is, I think we looked it up last time. I couldn't. It's Harry S5449 underneath TikTok, and I think I have a Facebook page. You can look me up on Facebook. Again, it's harrycr@cox.net. But on my TikTok page, I did a lot of, started off just showing a lot of fossils. I love collecting fossils. And somehow or another, I built myself up to 28,000 followers. So, and I still don't know what they're following, but I'm glad.
Hey, man, yeah.
But now I branched out into other things, so we talk about all kinds of things. I haven't done it as much as I would like to the last year, but I'm getting back into it. But appreciate you letting me mention that.
Yeah, sure. All right, Harry Creek, part Cherokee Indian, lived on the West Coast, got in the military, became an honor guard in the military, went to flight school, learned how to fly helicopters, and you gave how many years of service to us?
22.
22 great years of service, got out, stayed in the aviation business over here at PHI, making sure everybody flies offshore and brings that all in the gas into Louisiana safely. And retired now and running around having a bunch of fun. And yeah, I was real just interested in, you know, I'm always fascinated when someone has a backstory like Cherokee Indian and finds their way to Acadiana. And I call it Today's Acadiana. And it's all these great stories. You know, it's not just the Boudreaux and Thibodeaux coming in from Nova Scotia, and that is much more complex and rich. So so here's another one today.
That's it. That's another one. I always look at it like this. I've lived in Louisiana now for about 38 years. Been married for 33. You never know what you're going to find in Louisiana.
You got that right.
It's such a mixture. It's like a gumbo. You never know what you're going to put on the gumbo, but it tastes so good.
It does. Well, man, look, keep spreading the good news, man.
I will.
I love your TikToks. It's always upbeat. We got just this short little life right now. Why not pass it on?
That's it.
Pass on some love. And thank you for coming by.
I appreciate the invite.
And we'll talk again soon.
All right.
That's another edition of True Brew Bobcast. And we'll see you next time. Thanks. Thank you, brother. Cheers.
Great.